The book of Exodus tells a story of faith, struggle, and liberation. The Israelites, enslaved in Egypt, cried for freedom, ignored by a powerful Pharaoh. God chose Moses, a Hebrew raised in Pharaoh's court, to liberate them. Moses demanded the release of the Israelites, but Pharaoh refused, leading to the 10 plagues. Each plague demonstrated God's power and Pharaoh's defiance, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Welcome back to Bible Stories and Chronicles channel. We will continue with the story of the 8th, 9th, and 10th plagues from Exodus 10 and 11 in this video. If you like to hear beautiful stories from Bible, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you. The stubborn Pharaoh and the plagues of Egypt. The Nile turned to blood, frogs overran the land, and Egypt was thrown into chaos. Pharaoh remained unmoved, attributing these calamities to nature or Moses' magic. Each plague offered Pharaoh a chance to relent, but he clung to his defiance. The plagues escalated, striking at the heart of Egyptian society and challenging their beliefs. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, refusing to acknowledge God's hand in these events. A glimpse into chapters 10 and 11. Locusts, darkness, and the final warning. The plagues of locusts and darkness pushed Egypt to the brink. Locusts consumed everything, leaving a barren wasteland. Darkness, thick and suffocating, enveloped Egypt for 3 days. This darkness symbolized Pharaoh's spiritual blindness and foreshadowed the final devastating plague. The 8th plague, a plague of locusts. A vast swarm of locusts descended upon Egypt, consuming everything in their path. Fields and trees were stripped bare, turning the land into a barren wasteland. Pharaoh, witnessing the devastation, pleaded with Moses to remove the plague. Moses prayed, and a strong wind carried the locusts away. Despite the reprieve, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more, refusing to let the Israelites go. Moses interceded and a strong wind carried the locusts away. Pharaoh, relieved, reverted to his old ways, refusing to let the Israelites go. The cycle of defiance and suffering continued. Pharaoh squandered his chance for mercy, setting the stage for the next plague. The darkness that followed was a tangible manifestation of Pharaoh's spiritual blindness. The 9th plague was a darkness so profound it crushed the spirit. For 3 days, Egypt was enveloped in impenetrable darkness. The Egyptians, paralyzed by fear, huddled in their homes. Even Pharaoh's palace was plunged into an abyss of blackness. The darkness symbolized the spiritual darkness that had gripped Pharaoh's heart. The darkness was heavy and oppressive, seeping into their very bones. Egyptians stumbled through the streets, their world transformed into a labyrinth of shadows. Inside their homes, families huddled together in fear. The darkness spoke of divine judgment, a manifestation of Pharaoh's spiritual blindness. His continued defiance plunged his people into a living nightmare. As the 3rd day of darkness dawned, Pharaoh summoned Moses. Pharaoh offered a concession: leave Egypt but leave the flocks behind. Moses, guided by God, insisted on taking everything for worship. Enraged, Pharaoh threatened Moses, who stood his ground. Moses declared he would not see Pharaoh's face again. He left Pharaoh alone in the darkness, his heart hardened. The darkness solidified Pharaoh's stubborn pride. His advisors whispered in doubt and fear, but Pharaoh remained unmoved. Even the pleas of his people fell on deaf ears. The stage was set for a final, devastating confrontation. The darkness lifted and the sun broke through the clouds. Egyptians emerged, relieved yet apprehensive. Pharaoh felt a flicker of hope, but his advisors were not convinced. The streets were quiet, the shadow of darkness lingering. The God of Israel was not one to be trifled with. Moses delivered a final, chilling warning. God would strike again, and this time the blow would be devastating. Every firstborn in Egypt would die, from Pharaoh's son to the lowliest servant. The weight of Moses' words hung heavy in the air. Even Pharaoh must have felt a shiver of fear for his son's life. Moses, his mission delivered, turned to leave. But before departing, he offered Pharaoh one final chance, a glimmer of hope amidst the impending darkness. "This shall be a sign for you," he declared. "On that very day, you shall let me go out of here, with my children and my livestock." The choice, it seemed, was clear. Pharaoh could cling to his pride, his defiance, and condemn his firstborn son, and indeed all of Egypt, to a fate too terrible to contemplate. Or he could finally acknowledge the power of the God of Israel, swallow his pride, and let the Israelites go free. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. The fate of his son, the fate of his kingdom, rested on his shoulders. Would he finally relent, bow to the will of a God he refused to acknowledge? Or would his stubborn pride, his insatiable lust for power, condemn his people to unimaginable suffering? The hours ticked by, each one a hammer blow against the anvil of Pharaoh's resolve. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the land, a tangible reminder of the darkness that was soon to follow. The fate of Egypt, it seemed, hung in the balance, suspended between defiance and deliverance, between the darkness of Pharaoh's pride and the light of God's mercy. As darkness fell upon Egypt, a palpable tension gripped the land. The air, usually alive with the sounds of evening, was thick with anticipation and dread. The Egyptians, their hearts heavy with foreboding, huddled in their homes, their faces illuminated by flickering oil lamps. In the palace, Pharaoh paced his chambers, his heart a battleground of pride and fear. The weight of Moses' prophecy pressed down on him, a suffocating premonition of doom. He thought of his son, his heir, the boy's laughter echoing in his ears, and a cold dread gripped his heart. At the stroke of midnight, a hush fell over the land. A cold wind swept through the streets, extinguishing lamps, carrying with it the scent of death. And then it began. A piercing cry, filled with unimaginable grief, shattered the silence, followed by another and another, until the air was thick with the sound of lamentation. The hand of death, swift and merciless, moved through the land, striking down the firstborn in every Egyptian household. From the humblest peasant's hut to the grandest palace, no home was spared. The cries of the bereaved, a symphony of despair, rose up to the heavens, a chilling testament to the God of Israel's power. The morning sun, usually a symbol of rebirth and hope, rose over a land shrouded in grief. The cries of mourning, a heart-wrenching chorus, filled the air, replacing the usual sounds of daily life. The streets, usually bustling with activity, were eerily deserted, the silence broken only by the occasional sob or wail. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, now reflected the nation's sorrow, its waters flowing sluggishly, as if in mourning. The once vibrant fields, already ravaged by the previous plagues, now seemed to share in the collective grief, their crops withered and brown, a tangible representation of the land's despair. Inside the homes of Egypt, families gathered around their dead, their faces etched with grief. The women, their hair unbound, their clothes torn, wailed and beat their breasts, their cries a testament to the depth of their sorrow. The men, their shoulders slumped, their eyes filled with pain, struggled to maintain their composure, their hearts breaking with each strangled sob. Even Pharaoh, hardened as he was, could not escape the wave of grief that swept over the land. The cries of mourning, echoing through the palace halls, penetrated his chambers, a constant reminder of his loss. Exodus, the journey to freedom begins. Pharaoh, broken and defeated, finally relented. The death of his son, the heir to his throne, had shattered his pride, his stubborn will crumbling like dust before a mighty wind. He summoned Moses and Aaron, his voice, once filled with arrogance, now barely a whisper. "Go!" he said, his words heavy with sorrow and resignation. "Leave this place. Take your people, your flocks, your herds, and everything you own. Just leave." And so it was, after centuries of enslavement, the Israelites were finally free. They poured out of Egypt, a vast multitude of men, women, and children, their faces a mix of relief, disbelief, and anticipation. They carried with them their meager possessions, their hopes, and their dreams. Their hearts filled with gratitude for the God who had delivered them from bondage. The Exodus had begun. The Israelites, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, journeyed towards a new land, a land promised to them by their God, a land where they could live in freedom and worship without fear. their journey would be long and arduous, filled with challenges and obstacles. But they would face each challenge with courage and faith, knowing that the God who had delivered them from Egypt would never forsake them. Their story, a testament to the power of faith and the enduring human spirit, would be passed down through generations, a beacon of hope for all who yearn for freedom. The Wages of Defiance, Lessons from Pharaoh's Stubbornness. The story of the Exodus, particularly the events described in chapters 10 and 11, offers profound lessons about the nature of power, pride, and the consequences of defiance. Pharaoh, blinded by his arrogance, refused to acknowledge the power of the God of Israel, clinging instead to his own fleeting authority. He saw the plagues not as divine warnings but as personal attacks, challenges to his rule, and with each act of defiance he dug himself deeper into a pit of his own making. His stubbornness, his unwillingness to bend, had devastating consequences, not just for himself, but for his entire nation. The plagues, each one more severe than the last, brought Egypt to its knees, decimating their livestock, destroying their crops, and plunging their land into darkness and despair. Pharaoh's pride, his insatiable lust for power, had blinded him to the suffering of his own people, leading them down a path of destruction. The death of the firstborn, the final devastating plague, shattered Pharaoh's resolve, breaking his iron will and forcing him to confront the true cost of his defiance. The cries of mourning echoing through the palace halls were a stark reminder that true power lies not in brute force or political might, but in humility, compassion, and a willingness to acknowledge a power greater than oneself. The story of Pharaoh serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that true leadership requires wisdom, humility, and a willingness to listen to the voices of reason and compassion. It highlights the dangers of clinging to power at all costs, of allowing pride and arrogance to cloud one's judgment, and the importance of recognizing the limits of human authority in the face of a power greater than ourselves. The power of faith, the triumph of the human spirit. In stark contrast to Pharaoh's stubbornness stands the unwavering faith of Moses and the Israelites. Despite centuries of enslavement, despite facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles, they clung to the belief that God would deliver them, that he would lead them out of bondage and into a land of freedom. Their faith, tested time and again, never wavered, serving as a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. The plagues, while terrifying and destructive, served to strengthen their resolve, each act of divine intervention reinforcing their belief that God was on their side. They witnessed the Nile turning to blood, the swarms of locusts consuming their crops, the darkness that enveloped the land, and yet their faith did not falter. They understood that these were not random acts of cruelty, but signs of God's power, his unwavering commitment to their liberation. The Exodus, the culmination of their centuries-long struggle, was a testament to the power of faith, the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. Their journey, though long and arduous, was fueled by the belief that God was leading them, that he would guide them through the wilderness and into a land flowing with milk and honey. The story of the Exodus is a timeless reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can endure, that faith can move mountains, and that the human spirit, when guided by belief and a commitment to justice, can overcome even the most daunting challenges. A timeless message relevance of the Exodus today. The story of the Exodus, though set in ancient times, carries a timeless message, one that resonates deeply with people across cultures and generations. It speaks to the universal yearning for freedom, the struggle against oppression, and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming power. The plagues, a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked power and oppression, serve as a warning to all societies. They highlight the dangers of ignoring the cries of the marginalized, of turning a blind eye to injustice, and the importance of holding leaders accountable for their actions. The Exodus story also offers a message of hope, a reminder that change is possible, that even the most entrenched systems of oppression can be dismantled. It teaches us that courage, faith, and collective action can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and that the pursuit of justice is a journey worth undertaking, no matter how long or arduous the path. The Exodus is not just an ancient tale, It is a living story, one that continues to inspire and challenge us today. It reminds us that the fight for freedom, equality, and justice is ongoing, and that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and compassionate world. We will continue with another beautiful story from Bible in our next video. Subscribe so that you will not miss it. Thanks for watching.